Howdy and welcome back to Celebrating Vintage Model Kits. Going to be looking at a 1970 frog kit of the Westland Wyvern. This is a 72nd scale kit. It's kit number F198, and we got box art by a gentleman by the name of Vic Carles. And this kit of the Wyvern is an unusual aircraft, and if you were interested in making a kit of the Wyvern, this was it up until the 2000s when a couple of other manufacturers would come out with some new kits. This was the only thing you could buy. There was a couple of vacuum form kits, but as far as a regular injection molded plastic kit, this frog kit was the only game in town forever. So the Wyvern, what's up with that? It's a strange looking bird. So the Wyvern originated as a Westland project for a naval strike fighter towards the end of the war, 1944. Originally, their concept was a mid-engine aircraft similar to like a P-39 Air Cobra to allow for the cockpit to be pretty far forward, giving it excellent visibility for a naval aircraft. An Air Ministry specification was issued to develop it further for N1144, and it was supposed to be supposedly from the outset being designed to take a turboprop engine, but at the time there wasn't any viable turboprops, so it was designed around a Rolls-Royce regular piston engine, the Eagle, which was a 24-cylinder H-block. It produced something along the lines of 3,500 horsepower, so it was a pretty powerful motor. The specifications ended up calling for it to be able to take the turboprop in the future, and so the design evolved as they went along to a little bit more of a conventional design. The cockpit, in the regular area, and the engine towards at the front of the nose. The Eagle was also supposed to drive counter-rotating propellers. So to kind of offset the fact that the cockpit had moved back, they kind of created this humped fuselage in order to set the cockpit fairly high up to, again, provide good visibility for carrier landing. It's to be equipped with 4 20mm cannons and either carry a torpedo or bombs or rockets. The first prototype, TF1, which stood for Torpedo Fighter, flew on 16 December 46. But around that time, the Eagle engine was canceled. Rolls-Royce, was looking more towards producing jet engines as opposed to more conventional piston engines, since they could see that that was the way of the future. So the Eagle got canceled, and the initial production order wasn't even able to be fulfilled. So a contract for these was let for the TF1s, but there weren't enough Eagle engines to produce all of them. So they went and just redesigned it for the turboprop that they were originally thinking about. New contract of N1245, was a specification in order to produce one with a Rolls-Royce Clyde turboprop and 2 with the Armstrong Siddeley Python. So the TF2 prototype with the Clyde engine flew first, 18 January 49. But again, the Clyde was canceled, so that by default ended up putting the Wyvern being equipped with the Python turboprop. And so the first Python version flew on 22 March of 49. And at this point, they had added an ejection seat to it. A total of 20 TF2s were completed. But one of the, there's a lot of teething problems with this aircraft, and, it took several years for it to go from, design to actual service. Something like 8-9 years for that whole process to occur. So switching over to the turboprop, with big 13-foot counter-rotating propellers on here, created a lot of torque, so they had a lot of control problems. So they increased the size of the fin to this big, huge thing. Added these finlet things here. On the wings, they had little strakes and stuff. So they were trying all kinds of things to make it handle better. But one of the other problems that would happen was the turboprop. When the aircraft was launched on the catapult, the turboprop, the Python engine, couldn't handle that quick acceleration very well. So quite often it would flame out, right after launch. And so that created some problems with it, along with all the aerodynamic changes that needed to be done. And it wasn't finally declared fit for service until 1952. And then the final version, the TF4, that TF was swapped out for, instead of being a torpedo fighter, so they recognized that this thing at this point now, it was only going about 360 miles an hour, and by the 50s, this was no longer a fighter. So it was changed to S4, which the S stood for strike, and 50 were ordered. The last 7 of the TF2s were converted to the Python engines to make up part of that 50 aircraft order. And then they became shore-based. The first shore-based squadron became active in May of 53. That was 813 Naval Air Squadron. And altogether, a total of 127 airframes were produced. 124 were completed with engines. 3 of those that were not completed with engines were ones that were Eagle, were supposed to be Eagles, that they didn't complete. So the carrier trials started in June of 1950 on the HMS Illustrious, but it didn't receive its full carrier clearance until April of 54. Because just, like I said, we're having just constant struggles with this and having to do modifications to it to try to make it, a decent aircraft. But that flame out situation, cost a lot of aircraft and a lot of lives. But the ejection seat being equipped was a good thing. And in fact, one of the aircraft on 13 October of 54 was launched, and Lieutenant B.D. McFarlane ended up going in the drink because it flamed out. The carrier ran over the aircraft, but he was able to manage to eject, even though the aircraft had sunk underwater. So he became the first pilot to eject from an aircraft from underwater. A notorious first for the Wyvern. 830 Squadron ended up having combat from the HMS Eagle during the Suez Canal Crisis, Operation Musketeer. Altogether, they flew a total of 79 sorties, with 2 aircraft lost to anti-aircraft fire. Ultimately, the Wyverns were completely withdrawn from service by 1958. And out of those 124 completed airframes, 68 were involved with accidents. So you're talking about almost half. 39 of them were write-offs, and there were 13 fatal incidents, including one U.S. Navy pilot who was killed test flying a Wyvern. So that's a little history on the aircraft, kind of unusual aircraft. Some people really, really love this, and a lot of people think this is one of the ugliest planes ever made. So let's look at their kit here. We've got interesting watercolor artwork on here, and it looks like this is from the Suez Canal expedition, because you've got the yellow and black stripes that were added for recognition. You got includes choice of markings on the side here. This side's got the multi-language listings here. So you got English, Dutch, German, French, Swedish, and Italian. So kind of a interesting mix. You don't really see the Swedes and the Dutch being included on a lot of these kit instructions. This side here shows some other aircraft available: a Mosquito, Freedom Fighter, Soviet SB-2, a Bullfighter. On the end, we've got our kit number, the F-198, part of the Red Series, repeat of the top box art, and a spot for the price. Same thing on this end. Then on the bottom, we've got our color guide. And so we've got this typical 50s Royal Navy fleet air arm markings of this kind of duck egg blue with a dark slate gray on top. And one of these is for the Suez, and one's just a regular squadron markings. Made in Great Britain by Rovix. And this is a flip top box. So it flips down, which is a little different. And on the side of the bottom part, you still got some additional kits available. We've done a video on this one before. MiG-21 fish bed, Lightning, Lysander, Blackburn Shark, Shackleton. That'd be a neat kit to get. On this side, LTV Corsair 2 and a BF-109F. So inside here, we've got our kit still bagged, so we'll be opening that up. And here is the instructions. Let's take a look at these first. And this is a giant bed sheet. Really have to fold open the whole thing to really get at it. So across the top, you've got what the different symbols mean. Some tips on putting it together. Initially with the cockpit, so you get a little bit of a cockpit here instead of the just plain little seat. Interesting control column there. And then you've got the contra-rotating props here. I don't think they actually contra-rotate, since it looks like it just goes onto a peg. So you glue this to the front and leave this middle one loose. So you can spin them both, but they're not going to actually be contra-rotating. Here's our main gear. Looks like a little bit of detail going there. Assembling the fuselage, putting the engine in. These are wings with all the extra little fillets and stuff that were added. And see, one near the ailerons, this other one here about mid-wing. These were triple folding wings. They'd fold right around here, and then they also fold the tip, so it kind of fold up, and then the tip would fold back the other way. Then down here we've got landing gear assembly. Looks like they give you parts to be able to do it up or down. And then finally putting on the cockpit. And the usual send in if you're missing parts. On the back side of this, we've got these top model tips. So a bunch of suggestions on how to do a good job of building a model kit. So you can see this kind of takes up a lot of space if you're trying to follow the instructions while you're building this thing. This is a bit of a pain, how large they have it. Okay, so next up we've got our decals, which still have the original cover on them. You can see through it there, they've kind of yellowed. So if you're going to use these, you probably have to stick these out in the sun for a few days. Maybe try to get some of that yellow out. But as far as the aircraft represented here, these are both real aircraft. So this one here, WN325, is an S4 that was built 22nd September of 55, delivered to the Fleet Air Arm on 17 October 55, to HMS Black Cap, which was a Royal Navy Air Station at Stretton. It was transferred on December 2nd, 55 to HMS Peregrine, which was another Naval Air Station at Ford, and then finally went to 830 Squadron. And at that point, it was coded initially 133 FD, and then it became coded 373J when it was on the Eagle. So that is the J that you see here, which is represented here, but the 373 is covered by the Suez Canal markings on there. This aircraft ended up being withdrawn from service for an overhaul on January 3rd of 57, and returned to service July 3rd of 57. When it was assigned to 831 Squadron back at RNAS Ford, it was coded 380 with the letter O. It was written off on November 1957 when it was flying off the Ark Royal. I think it was off of Norway, possibly. And the port undercarriage dropped onto the catwalk after it caught the number 4 arresting wire, so it kind of slid off to the side, fell down over there. The propeller disintegrated, and not only did it cause damage to this one, but it caused damage to a couple of other aircraft on the deck. Sub-Lieutenant R.W. Edwards was not injured, but the aircraft was considered to be damaged enough that it was actually written off and scrapped on January 9th of 1959. Now, the second aircraft here, WL-880, was also an S4, and that was delivered on 14 June of 54. It was the 88th aircraft produced, and it ended up crashing on 11 October of 1955 with Lieutenant Commander Peter Watson flying off the HMS Eagle. And another one of these, right after launch, the engine flamed out. He was seen to eject and his chute opened, but when the helicopter crew was able to fish him out of the water, he was dead by the time they got him. So this one was off of Norway. So it may have been, hypothermia, being, lost in such cold water that he'd died before they were able to fish him out. So yet again, another one of these kits that, just these innocuous markings, just plain Jane something or other. And it turns out there's, a death, involved with one of these sets of markings for a kit here. So was able to source photographs for both of these. So we'll show those to you here. Let's take a look at our plastic in here. As I mentioned, this is still sealed. This large bag that gets folded over and then, I guess melted down to do that. Pull it open. And it doesn't look like we're going to need an X-Acto blade. But yeah, we got some good 70s air coming out of that sucker. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Let's do it this way. So here's our fuselage halves. So we've got pretty fine raised panel lines here. And here's where the turboprop exhaust would be. It's all molded on, unfortunately, but it is open, so you have kind of an open hole into there. We've got our tail hook is molded on there. And interesting, the tail fin is molded full on one side. You get this line to the other half. And let's see how this got minimal locator pins on here. See how this fits up. Not the best fit in the world. There we go. So we're going to end up with a pretty substantial gap on that tail. And as far as the nose goes, across the top, yeah, you're definitely going to need to do some filling if you want that to look good. And a little bit of flash up around the front there. But overall, not too bad. Interesting, there's a square here that almost looks like where the exhaust stacks for the Eagle engine would have gone. A little odd. Okay, so that is your fuselage. Now here's our wings. And again, same thing, we've got some fairly fine raised panel lining on here. Engraved lines to represent the ailerons. Trim tabs are raised. Got our cannon barrels molded on. You can see a line here, an engraved line. No, that is a raised line for the wing fold. And then the wing fold out there. A little bit of flash on here too. Unusual, considering this is a first year issue kit, to have flash showing up. But there's the inside, so you can see there's really no detail on the inside of the wheel well area. Got some sinkholing happening on these wingtips there, and then here's some slots for those little extra veins that would go in there. There's that, and let's get this one. So the lower wing's got its own sprue, and here's the dive brakes that were added, and engraved lines for the flaps. These were, I think, Ferry Youngman flaps, so these would slide out to give more lift. And there you have the inside. Looks like if you're going to put the rockets on, you need to punch through on the inside of the wing there. And this sprue has our horizontal tail fins that are split, so you got top and bottom half. Here's our rockets, and lots of sinkholes on these warheads. In fact, this one's completely separated. Really poor rockets, and again, you get the fins are stacked incorrectly on there. Here's our cockpit, which does have some instruments down the side. And there's our ejector seat, or ejection seat. That's a shaft for the prop. There's our wheels, a little bit of detail on there. And here's one of our propellers, the rear one. Now this has our front propeller. Blades molded on, so you'd have to clean this up on the back side. There's the other half of our horizontal stabilizer. Here's our pilot, and he is pretty weak sauce. Very, very generic. Some more rockets. These look a little better molded. There's one sinkhole on this one, but not as bad as the other tree had. Then we've got our gear doors, which do have some details on the inside. There's the outside. Here's some of those fins. And our instrument panel has a couple of instruments on there. And then this tree has the generic stand. This isn't the full swivel stand that would come out a little later. And here's our main gear, which does have some detail to them. It's not too bad. And there's the rear half of the engine, the propeller. And somehow we've ended up with two canopies. So that's a little bonus. This one's got a lot of extra plastic on here. This is smooth across the back here. There's raised on the front lines, and those framings on the inside are raised on the inside. I'm not sure how that was supposed to be. Looking at that, looks like it may be some internal frame bracing. It's being represented there, but that's going to be hard to kind of paint. But it looks like there's, if this is accurate, there's extra frames there. So I have to go back and look at photographic reference on this. But it is a very thick canopy. Not that there's much to see inside the cockpit, but there you go. So there you have it. That is your Frog Westland Wyvern. And then as far as other issues of this, this is a Frog kit. So that means that it's going to get kicked around the world a few times. So you got this original 1970 issue. 71, they went to a regular standard top opening box. 72 was fairly similar. 72 also saw one of the partnerships with Hasegawa. Hasegawa did an issue with new artwork. Frog was boxing Hasegawa kits, and Hasegawa was boxing Frog kits. So that was a short partnership in the early 70s. 74 was a new boxing with the artwork now is the entire top of the box instead of this red section over here. And then that's it for the Frog original issue stuff. In the 80s, the mold started kicking around, and so a company called Karskov Toy Factory offered it a couple of times. Mostly appears to be bagged versions of the kit. The pictures I saw, the molding looks pretty poor on it. 92, ADP in Russia, issued it with a similar box to this, but having the ADP logo up here. Same kind of artwork. And in the 90s, Mastercraft with some new artwork out of Poland did an issue. Also in the 90s, VVS Models from Russia popped one. Also in the 90s, Hobbick Mail Order in Japan did an issue of this as well. That was also a bag kit. In the 90s, also a company called Kharkov, I assume is a Russian company as well, did another bag. And Mastercraft did another issue in the late 90s with some new artwork as well. And then finally, in the 2020s, there's a company called Old Frog Novo. Old Frog Novo Models has reissued it looking fairly similar to this original issue as well. So that is all the issues. Not quite as many as some of the other Frog kits, but still getting around. So if you're interested in building yourself a Wyvern, you get one of the very brand new issue ones from the 2010s, 2020s. Or if you want to go old style, get one of these Frogs and spruce it up a bit. Well, that's about it for this one. If you have built one of these, tell us about it in the comment section. If you still got one sitting on your shelf, take a picture of it, send it in for the next viewer build video. The email address is in the channel description, so you can send that in. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and have yourself, as always, a great rest of your day.